Nigeria, one of the top leading countries in Africa, leading in things like oil, leading in things like population, leading in just the name as being a key African country to visit, to do business in. And one of the areas now we're seeing a big rise is in the fashion manufacturing industry. So I wanted to pull up somebody who I know who has started fashion manufacturing business in Nigeria to really give us some insights into the reality of doing manufacturing in Africa, and specifically in Nigeria, one of our hotspots for fashion, African fashion design, and now manufacturing. So I'm Jacqueline Shaw, I'm the African fashion business coach, and I'm hosting here our Fashion Africa Voices series. Do make sure that you do subscribe to the channel, make sure that you do a comment, like, all of that stuff, share it with your friends to make others know about what's going on in the beautiful continent of Africa. So I'd just like to welcome Abisade, who is the founder and custodian of an amazing new company called Heritage Apparel. It's based in one of the most notorious locations of Nigeria, where the Adure textile technique is founded in southwest Nigeria. I'd like to welcome you, Abisade, and please let us know a bit about you and about the company.
Sure. Thank you so much, Jacqueline, for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. So as you said, my name is Abisade Adenubi. I am a lawyer by training, but I'm now what I like to call an industrialist. So basically, I set up a garment factory in Ogun State in Nigeria last year in 2019. And basically what we do is we do mass production of basic utility apparel. So things like uniforms for schools, uniforms for security businesses, uniforms for industrial businesses, and so on. So basically, most kinds of basic apparel that you need in high volumes, we're able to produce. And we also do production for fashion brands and designers who want to scale up into retail who don't have the in-house capacity to do so. That's us in a nutshell.
I mean, it's amazing. I mean, we connected, what is it, 4 years, a while ago. And it was a concept at the time. You were visiting locations to maybe start this business in Nigeria. And you've now got this location, you've got staff, you've had your first order, 15,000 pieces, 10,000 pieces. It was a huge amount. It was a large quantity, and I was just like, wow, she focused on this vision, she got it started, and she's flying with it. But that's what it looks like on the outside. We're going to go a bit deeper into the reality. So we know that it can be challenging, but we're going to explore the realities of actually doing something as big as this concept is. But first, you're studying law, and you've been practicing in that field. What made you decide to do a fashion business, of all things? Right. What made you decide that?
Right. That's one question I get asked all the time. People are always like, how did you end up from a law firm into a manufacturing business? But basically, as you say, so I did law as an undergraduate degree and actually qualified as a lawyer in the UK. As you say, yes, I did study law as an undergraduate degree and actually went on to qualify as a lawyer in the United Kingdom. And so I practiced for almost 10 years, for almost a decade, worked in a number of different top global law firms in the UK, worked across different continents. I worked in New York, worked in Thailand as well, in Asia as a lawyer. And I also worked in a number of key financial institutions. And I think it was whilst I was working as a lawyer in 2010, I'd always had an interest in the fashion industry. In my family, we have a number of fashion designers and tailors. So I'd always kind of been exposed to fashion. And so in 2010, just really randomly, I decided there's a long story behind it, but I won't bore you. I decided to start a fashion business with a friend of mine who is a fashion designer. So of course I had a lot of interest, but I had no technical expertise or no technical skills in fashion. So we came together as a duo and set up a fashion brand called Africanwarxprint. at the time. And the idea behind the brand was I was working in the city of London with many corporate lawyers and investment bankers and so on. And I found that the fashion was just really dull. It was lots of blacks and grays and navy blues. And so my idea was to really infuse some color and some sort of oomph into workwear, but still remaining within the sort of confines or remits of professional attire. So we set up this business just kind of as a hobby, really. It wasn't sort of, meant to be anything grand. Set up the business, and then we started looking to do production. Okay. So we did production. Our first production was actually in India. And then we also did production in Thailand because I had worked in Thailand for 6 months when I was working in law firms. And I had built up a whole sort of roster of contacts in the tailoring and garment production industry there. So we did our second production in Thailand, and then another production in London as well. And it was whilst one day I had sort of traveled to Thailand to go and meet with my production team, and it's a 13-hour flight from London to Bangkok. And so I thought, this is insane. I can't have to be traveling 13 hours all the time just to go and see my production team. There must be a better way to do this. So I began to research, and I thought, I'm from Nigeria. We have tailors all over the place in Nigeria. Mm-hmm. So I began to research into, how I could shift production into Nigeria. Like I said, just, doing research, and I didn't really find any production outfit or units that I was happy to work with based on my experience having done production overseas. Okay. So I just wasn't finding the kind of quality that I had become accustomed to. And so I decided to set up a small production unit at home just to basically do my own garments. So I did that, but again, the skill was lacking because no matter how many machines you have at home, if you don't have the technical expertise or the skilled hands to produce, then there's still a problem. So that happened. And then it was alongside that. So I began to think, well, if I move my production to Nigeria, of course, I'm selling, so my clientele is mostly in Europe. It would just be too long for me to, import, because I was working mostly with European textiles from London, from the UK, it would just be too long for me to be importing fabric from Europe into Nigeria and then exporting the finished goods back into Europe where I was living at the time. So I began to explore and just carry out research into African textiles, authentic African textiles that I could use for my brand that would, really work with the brand's aesthetic and the look and feel of the brand. So I traveled to Ghana, to Ivory Coast, to the Gambia, and of course to Abeokuta in Ogun State, which is where, as you said earlier, which is the cultural home of Adire fabric. And it was on that trip going to look for Adire that I stumbled upon the factory that we now occupy. It was abandoned, it was inoperational, there was nothing happening in there, but it had all the machines. It had 66 machines.
Oh my gosh. It was waiting for you. It was waiting for you.
100% waiting for me.
Oh my gosh.
Here. In a nutshell.
The student is ready, the teacher appears, or where the businesswoman is ready, the fashion businesswoman is ready, the factory appears. Right, literally, wow, I didn't even know that. I'm just like, that's just amazing. So you spoke about, the major question, I'll go a little bit off our question, but we're going to flow with this anyway.
Absolutely.
The major question that, being a sourcing agent for brands and retailers who want to get into Africa, or just seeing what people think about the continent, is always around this concept of quality and people's mindsets that Africa can't make fashion. Because when they think of fashion, they think of Primark, Zara, H&M, Topshop. They think of these retailers, these high street retailers, when they think of fashion. So people's concept is that Africa can't do fashion. And then the second thing is they can't do quality. And it is something that comes back all the time, because this kind of cottage mindset. We talked about the tailors. One of the phrases I use is the one tailor by the roadside, which is people will go and they get things made, especially tourists, or just a tradition of going home. You've got your tailor, they can cut and sew, freestyle cutting, pattern cutting and cutting the clothing, and not even pattern cutting, just freestyle cutting. making the clothing for you. You got that one dress, but they can't scale the business. They can't scale for you if you now want 10, 50, 100, 1,000, 10,000 of that same dress. It's all going to be different sizes, different fits. There's no consistency within that, which is something about the foundation of fashion production, is the consistency, it is the systems. And how I believe that you had some input from Asia to come and train your tailors and your teams. Are they all Nigerian workers you have now, and these external trainers just came in, or are they there to kind of keep the business going?
So when we started the business when we basically went operational in June of last year,
yeah,
one of the things that I was crystal clear about was that I didn't want to work with existing tailors. I didn't want to work with tailors who had already been trained.
Gotcha.
Because for me, that was where the problem lay. You know, having had a lot of experience, you know, trying to recruit people for my small production hub at home. And so what I did was I just got young people, I just hired young people from the local area, ready to work and willing to learn. And then I got, so Sri Lanka has, you know, one of the, or some of the, you know, most renowned garment factories in the world, and quite progressive as well. So I got those trainers to come, and they literally spent 6 months with us in Nigeria, and we didn't really do any work from June until December 2019. We were training every single day.
Wow.
And so for me, it was to just set that foundation and have that solid training foundation, teach all my staff the right sort of, you know, industrial engineering methodologies, and just how a garment factory that is seeking to operate to global standards should work. So that was the foundation that we laid for the business, which has stood us in good stead so far.
So I do need to ask, because this is one of the areas that we do get. Well, I've people who want to start businesses, and I know people would want to know is, how did you fund it? The finance behind it. How did you fund it? Was it self-funded? Was there government support? I know there's some schemes with some of the banks in Nigeria, but how did you get this up and going? Because the realities of this is a big operation. How did you get it up and going?
Right. It's interesting because like people just often tend not to believe when I say that it's been self-funded up until now. It's been a huge expense, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
But it's been self-funded. It's been funded through, you know, like savings, through working through, and the great thing is I'm still a lawyer, so I can do, you know, consulting work from time to time. So yeah, it's basically been self-funded, and it's been hard. It's been hard, but it's also part of my own personal story and journey. And I think also one of the key things is everybody else sees it as, you know, as this big thing. Everyone is like, oh my God, this is a massive.
It is. It's a big
factory, because I guess I'm the one who is in it. I don't really see the size. I don't really see the size of it. Like I just see the next thing that needs to be done, and I just get on with doing that. So I think maybe if I had seen it as this massive operation, I may have been put off from sort of, you know, going into it with my own funding at the outset. But I just literally did it like, you know, as we say in Nigeria, small. Just
well,
you know.
Yes. But that's probably the joy of not being from the fashion industry. Like I was saying to you earlier, I love your story. I love your vision for this and the impact that you're having. You may say small, but for me it's big. Okay. And it's something that I was looking at doing myself, as I mentioned to you, was having my own factory in Africa, because I'm all about doing impact. There's no point, you know, if you can, you know, then set things up, create jobs, and just change perceptions with it. But knowing the fashion industry, visiting these huge manufacturers in Asia and Europe, as I have done, you know, it's like I knew it would be a lot of work, and it's a lot of funding, finance, and a lot of effort. And fashion can be stressful. Many are like, don't do it. But I think it's a great opportunity, it's great business, and you're doing it now. So how many workers do you have? What's the size of your team at present? Like, how many did you start with, and how many are physically there now working?
So I started off with 40 trainees, and I still have 40 machinists.
Not 4 or 40?
40.
40, awesome.
So 40.
Okay, so that's still a decent amount of people, and then you were able to train them up. So the product you do is more workwear, you're saying, it's more uniform, things you're doing, you know, masks during the time of this recording, where, you know, we're going through this pandemic, and you're creating masks as well, and other PPE uniform for hospitals. Are you able, you're doing some of that as well? That's amazing. So you've been able to pivot
as well.
We'll get to some of that point as well. I don't want to take up our whole conversation, because I want it to be, it's a part of it, but it's really just learning more about the story of what you're doing. What has been some of the challenges of doing this kind of business? I'm sure there've been quite a few.
So there've been quite a few challenges. Some of them would not be, or are not what people would necessarily think that they would be. But I guess everyone's challenge is, you know, it's sort of unique to their own experience and to their own business. So for me, it's been just the volume of work that needs to be done for something like this. It's like, it's just one of me doing all of these plenty things. And in the early days of any business, for a number of reasons, one, because you're the one who has, you know, who has the vision. You're the one who's literally birthing this vision, one. And secondly, for financial reasons as well, you just don't have the resources to be hiring people, you know, kind of do a lot of yourself. So for the first year, actually we're still in the first year, but for the first, especially 6 to 9 months, it was insane. I felt like I was literally working around the clock. So that was the, you know, the sort of one of the biggest challenges for me. That secondly was to continue to fund the business, right? So like I said, I've been self-funded up until now, and that has meant doing other work whilst building the business. If you can just imagine, if you can just imagine.
Whoa, that's,
you know,
I salute you, but yeah.
You know, but you just have to do what you have to do. So again, you know, that's still around the volume of the work. And then I think also, because I hadn't actually lived in Nigeria for almost 20 years before I came here to build the factory and to sort of set up the business. And so I think being a woman in manufacturing, people are often looking for the oga being like, you know, like, where's the boss? And I'm like,
big man.
The big boss, you know, and I'm like,
it's me.
Yeah, she is. So that has also been, you know, been really interesting. But even in terms of, you know, in terms of my staff, because one of the key things for me is the impact, and that in any business, but especially in a business like this that is very kind of people heavy in terms of employees, your people just have to be at the center of the work that you do, period. Otherwise there's business. Anybody who owns a fashion business knows that if your tailors don't turn up to work, finito, there's no work. You know, there's no no matter how skilled you are, you can't do all the work by yourself. And so the way that I approach my staff is very different to the way that a lot of them have been accustomed to being treated in a workplace. So I found that even changing the mindset of what an employer-employee relationship needs to look like has also been quite interesting. Like initially they were just like, who is this woman? Who is this woman? Like, why is she talking to us like we're people? So that's also been interesting, just really, I guess just blending together as a team here. Yeah.
So that's insightful. I wouldn't, just the thought of that, what people are used to, and then you're coming with a very international working professional mindset because you've lived in so many different places and different cultures. I suppose that helps you to be able to transition living, even though it's where you're from, 20 years later, it's going to be very different, and it's different to what you've been accustomed to for 20 years. So, but I suppose it still helps with transition. As somebody who's also lived abroad in various places, it helps. That helps with the transition to live somewhere new.
Sure.
But then the way people are seeing you and the way you're approaching them, wow, well, it sounds like it's been a positive thing. Then that's probably going to be the strength of your business. So, what's been good? Talk about what's been challenging. What's been good? I mean, you're here now. Are you still working around the clock? Are you to breathe? I mean, well, I mean, we're all locked up right now, but how's it been for you now?
Good. So one of the very first good thing I would say is just the fulfillment of, because it took, like I only gave you, pretty much a nutshell in terms of the whole process. But it literally, so from the time that I set my eyes on this factory, that was in December 2014, to actually starting the factory last year was literally almost 5 years, right? So, and if you even look back to when I started the fashion business in 2010, it's been pretty much a 10-year journey to get here, right? A journey that I did not even know that I was embarking on. I was just doing this thing as a hobby, but let's even go from, when I actually saw the factory. And of course, so the factory was owned by the ex-president of Nigeria, President Olusegun Obasanjo. And even just getting, like, you don't just bump into the ex-president of Nigeria on the streets to begin to say, oh, I want to take over your factory. So even getting to him was one challenge. And then getting the deal done was another challenge. And then starting was another challenge. So I think now one of the great things for me, just coming here to the factory every day is like, wow, this actually happened. This actually happened. Like, so it's such an incredibly fulfilling feeling to come and to see all these people that I and my business are making an impact in their lives. It's a thing of immense joy. So yes, it is incredibly and still is incredibly challenging, but it's so rewarding as well. Like whenever I travel for different things and come back, I'm just always so overjoyed to be back here in the factory, because for me, I can see the fact that I'm building something where I want to prove to myself, to my staff, to fellow Nigerians, to Africans, and to the world that we can produce quality apparel in Nigeria, and we can do so whilst respecting the human rights of the people that work in the factories. Because I really am very passionate about doing things differently in terms of how we see garment factories generally.
That's awesome. That is, oh wow. It really is credible and incredible. So I salute you. Do you find that your legal background has helped when it comes to, because one of the issues with especially with garment production, because there's a lot of import, export, you're bringing in materials, you're bringing in trims, you're exporting things, and because the nature of this very complex industry of fashion and textile, has your legal background been a support for that in regards to paperwork and all of these agreements and contracts and all of this stuff? Is that, or was that just not really your aspect of legal, your legal career anyway?
It's been incredibly beneficial on a number of different levels. So one is I draft all my contracts by myself.
Wow. Awesome.
Yeah, which means that I know exactly what's in them. And B, I save on legal costs as well, which, as we all know, are not insignificant. So that's one. Secondly, I guess, just being trained as a lawyer and having legal training, we're trained to really pay attention to detail, to pay attention to structure, to processes, to systems. And, running any kind of manufacturing business is a very process-driven endeavor, right? There are a lot of moving parts that you have to keep on top of. And so having been trained in that way has been really helpful. But also the work ethic, because I worked in, not to brag or anything, but I worked in like 3 of the top 5 law firms pretty much in the world, and same for financial institutions. And so the kind of training that you get, the work ethic that you have to, because, these are firms where you're literally working around the clock, you're put on a crazy transaction with crazy deadlines to close an M&A deal in, say, 3 weeks. And that's it. For 3 weeks, your life is on hold. You're in the office, you're working, you're drafting and reviewing contracts day in, day out. And so that work ethic. So now it's not even a problem for me to be working around the clock for my own business.
You set the foundation. It really has set the foundation for you.
Work ethic, you know, and I tell my staff all the time, I didn't understand why you're I didn't understand why you're tired. What have you done?
Like, this is nothing. 2 hours sleep, that's fine.
Yeah. So definitely the work ethic, for sure.
So let's talk about the products then, because I know you just, well, effectively you've only really opened since January, I guess, or December. So what kind of customers do you have? What kind of sales channels are you using to find new customers? How does that side of it work?
Right. So for us, the work that we do is mostly contract manufacturing. So we don't necessarily produce stock and then seek to sell the stock. We may do that at some point, like on brand manufacturing. But for now, what we're doing is contract manufacturing, which means that we get an order, we get a contract, and we produce for that. So for example, now we're producing face masks for a state government and for other private sector organizations as well. So the first order that we got was for 20,000 face masks, and we're doing more and more of those. So in terms of, so I guess at the beginning, it was very much based on relationship marketing. So I just really, you know, worked my network at the beginning, just, you know, just letting everybody know what I was doing. It helps that we had a launch. Our official launch was in January. And so that was kind of us announcing ourselves to the world. We're here, we're open for business. So that really gave visibility in terms of the work that we're doing and the vision that we have. So there's that, but there's also, you know, we have a sort of concerted marketing effort as well that we're still working on. You know, it's still definitely work in progress. But the idea is to kind of, you know, look across different industries that we're able to service and just really, you know, execute the plan for each of those industries one by one.
Okay, so will you, because at the moment you're working with local businesses or organizations or government institutions as well, obviously the health industry during this climate. But are you looking to do export as well, or is you most want to keep it local for Nigeria, local production?
Definitely looking to the export as well. So as we all know, Nigeria is a huge country with a massive population. So even focusing on Nigeria alone, it's already a huge market. But I think that because my vision is to build a global standard garment factory, there's no reason why we can't do exports as well. So, and of course, as you would know from the work that you do as well, there have been groanings in the fashion industry for years now in terms of, and I guess, you know, this whole pandemic has probably even made that even, you know, more of a reality in the sense that people are looking for alternative places to manufacture.
Sourcing regions,
Exactly, alternative, you know, so yeah, locations and geographical regions to manufacture. And so I think that Nigeria and Africa as a whole, you know, are quite primed to take advantage of that shift. And of course, there's the issue of sustainability as well, where, you know, people are beginning to see and to really understand just how the true cost of the fashion industry in many regions. And so I think that Africa has a real opportunity in these times to do things differently. So yes, definitely exports is on our radar.
Okay, that sounds good. And that would be still continuing with the kind of the workwear, the uniform kind of products, or would you expand to fashion products? Because
we're definitely expanding into fashion products because, as I mentioned earlier, we already have a hub in the factory premises where we do production for local, actually not just local fashion brands. I've been reached out to by designers abroad as well to do smaller productions for them. So there's definitely scope. And the great thing about where we are is we have the luxury of space at the moment. So we can definitely expand relatively quickly to be able to do, you know, high street fashion apparel.
That's amazing. That's amazing. I'm sure you're going to get contacted quite a bit from this video as well. So, and obviously we'll be working with you closely as well as the plan is for future through the sourcing agency of African Fashion Guide. So for those who may be just as open-minded as you to go start a fashion manufacturing unit in Africa or in Nigeria, what would you recommend? What would be your takeaways for them who want to do the same kind of thing? Or yeah, what would you say to them?
Right. What I would say is, you know, first and foremost, to just really divorce in your mind the idea that running a fashion manufacturing business is the same as running a fashion business. It really isn't, because the manufacturing side is the less sexy, behind the scenes, hard. Well, I guess everything is a hard graft, but this is, you know, it's not easy, right? That's not to discourage anyone, but just to make, you know, just to ensure that you are ready. So for me personally, it's been a lot of personal sacrifice, a lot of things that I would ordinarily do for myself that I can't because of the business, right? So it's just not to take lightly the magnitude of what it is. So that's one. Secondly, as you alluded to earlier, the fashion value chain and supply chain is really opaque, it's really complex, and as we've come to see during this pandemic, is actually quite fragile. And so what I would say would be to really understand all of the processes that are involved in the marketing side. That's one. And also to not just understand the processes, but really begin to mitigate. So understand where the key risks lie, right? And to begin to mitigate those risks in your mind. So a lot of things can go wrong. So it's just really understanding what are the steps and processes involved. And then I guess finally it would be that, as I said before, it's a really process-driven business. So to really spend the time to put the processes and structures and systems in place, you know, before you start and as you continue to grow.
I think those are actually very practical tips and insights, you know, mitigating your risks, looking at the processes. People don't understand how complex the processes, the steps of just producing, even as simple as a t-shirt. How are you going to set up your manufacturing? Is it going to be like the kind of lean manufacturing? Is it going to be piece manufacturing in that sense, or, you know, with lines or with assembly lines, or, you know, how are you going to set that up? Are you going to just have people based on one skill set, or they're going to learn the whole garment skill? Like there's so much included, from the ironing, the pressing, the quality, the quality control, from the cutting, from the health and safety, which is, you know, you mentioned earlier, and you know, time this video, we just come out of Fashion Revolution, the month of Fashion Revolution. So, you know, it's even more key that we're looking at sustainable ways of doing business in fashion. But, you know, now we are here at the time of this video, you know, we're still here during this pandemic. How has this been for you? So with this pandemic happening, one of the things, there's been a lot of talks going on, and, you know, we're due to have one of our conversations, online conversations, the team will be working with me. And one of the things that we are asking is, what is it that the manufacturers want and need? Because it's easy for, you know, myself here in the UK, or, you know, my support, the team I'm working with, who are based also outside of Africa, to say this is what is needed. They need this, they need that. But what is it that your industry that you've now embarked in needs as a manufacturer in Africa, or let's just say for Nigeria, because that's where you are? What is it that you need?
Right. So for example, as we said, or as we've said throughout this conversation, the supply chain is actually, you know, quite complex and quite opaque. And I think that at every point in that supply chain, you need information to be able to do things effectively and efficiently. So for example, if you're even starting off with like machinery, or, you know, machines, for example, even just beginning to know and to think and to understand where do I, where should I source my machines from? What kind of machines should I look to buy? Or like how should I sort of go about thinking about and planning for maintenance of those machines? That's just one thing, and research into that could take days or weeks of contacting suppliers in different countries where you might have language barriers. There are all sorts of different things. Next thing, staff. For example, how should I go about hiring staff? What, like what kind of, work culture, where do I source my fabric from? So just like basically, so I think that if there was of course, like, every business owner has the responsibility to find out and to research for themselves, what all the different component parts of their business. But I think that if there was some sort of hub, for example, that had like directories or information, like sourcing information for different parts of the business, that would be really helpful. So for example, going into business for the first time, you have no idea, like, what the tax regime is, what the trade policies are, are there any banned substances that you're looking to include in the product line, for example. Those sorts of things that would not necessarily fall within your typical area of technical expertise and knowledge. Just being able to access those, those kinds of information relatively quickly, and in a kind of, quite an accessible manner would be really useful. I know everybody talks about access to finance and funding, but I've come to realize that everyone's journey is so different. Like I said, my own journey has been has been one of self-funding, which actually has its own perks as well. So even though it's been incredibly difficult, but it's incredibly rewarding, I have to say, to think that I had this vision, I put my money in this vision to build it from scratch with my two bare hands, and here it is today. Like, I don't owe anybody money. I don't, do you know what I mean? Like, it's a great feeling. It's a great feeling to know that, my sweat, blood is in this place, and I get it. I'm
soldier.
So again, access, just really understanding that there's not a one size fits all approach to things. People might get funding through grants and loans, some might get funding through equity, but it's just really thinking around your own business and, again, your own personal vision. So one of the things that has been really key for me in terms of, not necessarily looking for equity investments at this stage, and maybe open to that in future, has just been the fact that I just really want to build first and just see where I'm going, because I think that
that's wisdom.
Yeah, in the early days, you're still finding yourself. Yes, you have this grand vision, but the truth is, you're still exploring, right? It's still very much an adventure. You don't know 100% if it's going to work or not, and everybody has a different perspective about it. Some people think that you should share the risk and have equity partners, but again, to each their own. You just have to be true to your own personal calling and to your own personal vision. And if there's something or any sort of third party involvement that has the potential to dilute that which you have seen, think about it deeply. Yeah,
that's just amazing. Your own personal calling, that's the thing. That's, well, even in your case, I guess it wasn't even just a calling, it kind of evolved, isn't it? It's an evolving of a business from an idea, and then something else came out of it. And I think that's just wow. It's just wow. What a journey. What a journey. I mean, as you were speaking, I think when I first started this business 10 years ago now, there were some people who were trying to create like a council of some sort, and like an African fashion council, but because the complexities of the fact of 54/55 countries, it wasn't really effective. None of the British Fashion Council or that in the CFDA in New York, in the US, maybe something like that is where people can go and get that information. It's a huge task. I mean, we stick with our sourcing agency, and that's our way to be able to support those, to bring in the trade. But I know what you're saying, because it is, the complexity is there. That's what you're saying, the complexity, having that information of the things that you need. And hence, this is why Fashion Africa Voices, if you're not yet subscribed, what you're watching, do subscribe to the channel, because you're getting these insights from those who are doing the business on the ground, the reality of what it's actually like starting fashion businesses, and specifically in Africa, in African manufacturing and African fashion design. It's complex, but you're showing that it's possible to get started. The next step is scaling. Well, the next step is staying solid in that, and then you look at that scaling. But you've got a vision for where you want to go, and that's what I love about it. So yeah, I think just lastly, what's next? I mean, you've given us quite a few tips, some insights, so many nuggets in here. I'm like, wow, I can't wait to share this. But what is next for the company? Where you're at, right? I mean, we know we're in this right now, so with masks and supporting the industry and people, communities right now. But what is next post pandemic? What would be next for you? What was next for you?
So for me, when I was creating my plan for this year for the business, there were two key things. One was to really solidify our operations, because like I said before, a manufacturing business is really heavy on operations. So really solidifying that, making sure that our processes and systems are as efficient and effective as they can be. Really just, just holding the business under a microscope to see, are there any sort of leakages, are there any gaps, are there any areas where we could do things better, do we need other people with specific skills, just really understanding in a deeper sense what we need and providing those things. That's one. Secondly would be just really intensifying our marketing efforts. So we want everyone to know who we are, to know what we're doing, and to really understand how we're doing stuff as well. And then thirdly is, so whilst we were running our training sessions last year for our trainees, I realized that the reason why I didn't want to work with existing tailors at the outset of my business was, again, for the skill gaps or skills gaps that I had identified. And so I thought that, there's so many, youth unemployment is at an all-time high. And there's so many young people milling around with no work to do. And you have a lot of capacity building projects that come and train people for, say, 3 to 6 months, for example. The training, there are either no jobs for them to go to, or they don't have capital to set up businesses on their own. And so what I now decided to do was to set up a vocational training center on the premises, where we basically train young people in the local community in tailoring and fashion skills. And I guess the advantage of that vocational training being on our premises is the fact that we have a factory literally upstairs that can absorb those trainees once they're done with the training. And also, as we continue to build connections with like fashion businesses in Nigeria, in Lagos, for instance, we can also deploy some of those trained people to fashion businesses who are looking for skilled hands and well-trained people. So that's kind of next for us in terms of just really trying to set that up. So we've already started, putting together a curriculum for that. I'm working with a consultant who has set up fashion schools across Nigeria. So that's kind of what's next. And then the other thing is, again, as we're in the cultural home of Adire fabric,
yes,
we start to look into textile production as well. Again, we already have a dedicated space for that we're already starting to work with. But the idea would be to produce Adire fabric, but also begin to carry out research and development into how we can, I don't want to say modernize per se, because that creates all kinds of problems, but how we can see to the evolution of Adire fabric, how we can make it more commercially viable globally, and how we can make it more sustainable as well. Looking into how we can use more or less chemical, less chemical dyes, more natural dyes, for example, how we can the sort of artisanship and the craftsmanship of creating Adire, but how we can also mechanize some of the really low skilled aspects of producing Adura fabric. So that's kind of what we're looking to do.
You have me so excited right now. It's ridiculous. Like, girl, I am so excited about the future. I thank you massively for your time, for the sharing. I can't wait. It was due to come out to Nigeria later this year. Hopefully that can still happen. We'll have to take that 2-hour trip to come and see you somehow. But we'll be working together on so many options you've got coming out. So, you've got a partner in African Fashion Guide, hopefully long-term partner. And really excited. Your messaging, your insights, your advice, your experience, and your reality of the truth of doing fashion business in Nigeria has hit home. And I'm sure it's for me, for others watching, I'm sure. And I just want to salute you and say, all the best for the coming weeks and months. As you can get through this time, then you can make it through anything, I'm sure. So well done for all the successes. And so yes, thank you, Abisade.
Thank you.
Thank you. So for those watching, again, look at what we've learned today. It's been an amazing message. I've got more coming for you every week with trainings from me, business trainings, insights in the industry, more from the Fashion Africa voices. Every Thursday, a new video drops. Make sure that you subscribe. Make sure you put a comment. What did you think about what was said in this video? Have you already started to source in Nigeria? Are you considering it? Have you traveled? Would you go there? Come on, put your comments below. Let me know what you think. Like this video, share this with your network, and absolutely do subscribe. And I'll see you in the next video.